I have a question for you. Have you ever heard of tapping? I was a little bit familiar with the concept before my conversation with today's guest, but this interview has me convinced that I need to incorporate this simple practice into my daily life. Jessica Ortner is a mom, an EFT tapping expert, and New York Times best-selling author. She teaches a powerful self-soothing technique called tapping, which combines modern psychology and ancient Chinese acupressure points. We talk about how powerful tapping can be in helping you to cope with stress, whether that's the stress that often paralyzes us from taking action on our big ideas, or just the stress that comes along with everyday life. At the end, she even leads us through a tapping exercise, so you will get to experience it for yourself. I can't wait for you to hear my conversation with Jessica. Welcome back to the show. I get to share with you a new friend of mine and someone who I met through one of my favorite people, Lori Harder. You guys all know her. So any friend of hers is an immediate friend of mine. So this is official now, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I am excited to introduce Jessica to all of you because it's funny. We had talked about setting up this episode. I looked back at our emails and we had first emailed about it back in February before the entire world as we knew it just really changed. And so we're going to talk a little bit about tapping. And of course, I'm going to have you unpack what it is and how it can benefit people because it couldn't be more timely, especially with the extreme stress and uncertainty that is surrounding us right now. So I'm so grateful to you for
Me too. I'm so grateful. Thank you for having me.
So I would love if you would actually just start with your personal story because you're going to share with us some really powerful tools. And my favorite thing to hear from people is like the origin story of how in the world were you introduced to this methodology? And then how did you decide to make it your life's purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. So back in 2007, 2008, I was in a really stuck place in my life. But at this moment specifically where we're going back to, I was very sick with a cold. I was incredibly congested. My eyes were watering and I just felt horrible. And I have two older brothers. And one of my brothers, Nick, came over and he's like, "Oh, I heard that you've been really struggling and you can't beat this." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know what's wrong. I feel horrible." He said, "Listen, I heard about this thing online that might be able to help." He did not sell me on it. For someone to say I heard something online and that's it, definitely wasn't a big sell. And he said to me, "What I want you to do is just focus on how sick you feel in your body, and we're going to start to tap on these acupressure points. They're these meridian endpoints." And so he had me to start tapping on my face, and then I was tapping on the top of my head, and I kind of looked at him being my older brother. I was just waiting for the moment where he's like, "Haha, you will do anything I say." Like, because you look kind of ridiculous tapping on these points. But I started doing it and I started realizing that as I was tapping with my finger on these acupressure points, I began to really relax my body. I began to experience this sense of ease. But with that, I also gained clarity. And I looked at him with tears in my eyes and I said, "I don't want to get better." And he's like, "What do you mean you don't want to get better?" And I said, "I feel like I'm doing everything right and nothing is going my way. I feel like I'm working and working and working and I just need a break." And I realized that I was so bad at creating boundaries. And I also was just struggling so much emotionally with the weight that I was carrying that it was creating a physical response in my body. Now, I didn't sit down and say, "I'm going to give myself a cold." It wasn't in my head. It was a real cold. But it really showed me that when we are under so much stress and so much anxiety and we can't find our way out, the body often says no. The body begins to act up. And sometimes the body is the voice that we need. And so I started to then shift my tapping. And instead of focusing on feeling sick, I just gave a voice to how hopeless my life was feeling at the moment. And there was something so validating about being able to give it a voice. And what happens is when you have this anxiety, when you have this thought, it is creating a physical response, not just the cold. Sometimes it can just be pressure in your chest or a pain in your stomach, but anxiety is felt with the whole body. And so sometimes it's hard to just talk our way out of it because it's such a physical experience. When you begin to really honor how you feel and say these things out loud and you stimulate these points, it sends this calming signal to your brain. So you get to the point where you can have the thought, but your body is relaxed. And when you can think a negative thought, but your body is relaxed, it doesn't have the same power over you anymore. And so there I was in this moment tapping, and I just felt such a emotional and such a physical relief. But to be honest, like anything, sometimes we come across something that helps and then we just get busy. And so I had this like incredibly powerful experience, but it wasn't like suddenly I said, yes, this is what I want to do. No, I was like, wow, that's cool. And maybe a fluke, like maybe it was just this one time. Months pass and I'm going through a bad breakup and I'm crying in bed and I'm just desperate to find some relief. And I didn't remember it well. I remembered maybe half of the points. And I just started tapping on those points, giving a voice to how I felt. And once again, I just felt this immense ease, this peace in my body. So with that, my brother, Nick, has this idea. This was back in 2009. The Secret had just come out. Do you remember that?
Oh, heck yes. I had like the CD that I would play in my car.
Yes.
I was like all about
So it started with the movie. It was this documentary film about the law of attraction. And we were inspired by it. And we thought, what if we made a documentary film where we showed people go through the transformation with tapping? There had been so much documentation around it, but all of it was written. None of it was filmed. And so we put $50,000 on credit cards. I moved back in with my parents. My brother rented a tiny apartment on the top floor of a friend's house. And we ordered all this film equipment. We had no idea how to use it. And we just figured it out. And we made a film. And that was kind of our first step. Don't go watch it. I mean, you can watch the film. It's pretty good for amateurs, but that was kind of that first step that brought us into this work. And from there, we learned how to create an online community doing summits. We did this summit called the Tapping World Summit. This is, again, 12 years ago. So one of the first summits that ever existed. Now we see them all the time. But we were one of the first in that sense. And yeah, it just started a real passion. And it kind of grew from there, never having a moment where I said, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. It just was following my passion one step at a time. And here I am.
Okay, that's so cool to hear, especially the beginning stages of how you figured out how to produce this film. And we're going to circle back to that because as I shared with you, that's such a big message that we share with our audience is just being willing to get started, being willing to be a beginner.
Yes.
And not needing to know where that all is going to lead.
Yeah.
But
I have a confession. If I can, the first 6 months of filming, we never used that footage. It was horrible. We really did not know what we were doing. But if we didn't have those horrible 6 months where we really kind of, someone might look at it and say, well, that was a waste of footage. That was our learning experience.
Yeah.
And then after that, we were able to keep going. But I will say the biggest thing, and I'm going to jump in and answer this question because you said I'm going to answer it later, but if you don't mind.
Go for it.
It was really going back to the stress relief technique, because when you are so overwhelmed and anxious, what's happening is that you have this part of your brain called the amygdala, and it's firing off that fight or flight response because there's a part of you that says, this isn't safe, you're in danger. And in those moments, you feel like you need to fight, flee, or what happens most of the time is we just freeze. We just feel like we cannot take the next step. And that physical experience was really helpful for our ancestors who were out in the woods. It's really helpful if you're on a hike and you see a rattlesnake, you're going to have to figure out immediately what to do. It's not helpful when you're pursuing a dream. It's not helpful when you find yourself in a difficult situation because you can't fight your bills or flee them. And so when things feel stressful, we're having a physical reaction that is meant to benefit us, but it doesn't, because our lives have evolved so much and our brain hasn't kept up. And what happens in that state is that we don't have access to our prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that is the problem solver. That's the logical part of the brain. When we're feeling overwhelmed, we get to our computer and we look at our to-do list, and sometimes it can feel like we can't even read. We can't even think straight because it can be so overwhelming. Yeah. And so it wasn't, when you're following your dreams, it's not easy, but you can create ease. And that's the key, because if you can just create some ease, because it will be uncomfortable, then you have that courage and the mental capacity to take the next step.
So it's almost like this tool to bypass that initial response of freezing up. And I think we can all relate to that, to get you at least to take the next little step. That's powerful.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. So now I'm sure people are wondering, what the heck are they talking about? What is this tapping? What are they like? I can't even get a picture. If someone has like never heard of it, how do you describe what tapping is?
Right. So tapping is a self-soothing technique that combines ancient Chinese acupressure points with modern psychology. So the acupressure points, we have acupressure points all over our body, but these are real meridian endpoints that sometimes we use unconsciously. A lot of times when people are stressed, they grab the bridge of their nose and they kind of stimulate the eyebrow points.
Yeah, that's so true.
Right? Or they put their hand on their chest. When we feel overwhelmed, we suddenly put our hand on our chest. That's a great meridian point, the collarbone point. And so what we're doing now is we're having a real conscious experience where we're giving a voice to how we feel and we're stimulating these points. Now, what's really fascinating and what I love about your work is so much of what you do is about speaking the fear and accepting it and realizing that when we talk to each other as women and we share the struggles and the fear, all of a sudden we don't feel so alone, and it opens us up to more self-compassion and acceptance, and that helps us move towards action. Well, a big part of the tapping is that acceptance side. You always begin the tapping process by saying, even though, and you state the anxiety, even though I have this anxiety, I accept how I feel. Or some people say, I accept myself and how I feel. It's having a moment of saying, not pretending it's not bad, not trying to push away the feeling, just simply saying, I accept it, I honor it. And as you begin to tap, you always start with how you're feeling. And it's really honoring, giving a voice, so you're not fighting your current reality. And just that alone really gives you the ability to take a deep breath and not be fighting, having that fight in your mind and that struggle. Yeah. So tapping was something that's evolved throughout the years. There's been a lot of incredible research. When we started the documentary 12 years ago, we didn't have the language and the research around why tapping works. We saw people getting incredible results, but we couldn't really explain why. And now slowly in the last 5 years, there's been a lot more studies and research to the point that this has been approved by the VA to use with veterans.
Wow.
It's incredible for PTSD and incredible for panic attacks, which I can share a little bit about. And so the understanding that we're having now is that when you stimulate acupressure points, it sends a calming signal to your brain. And so it allows your brain to begin to know that your body is safe. It gets you out of that fight or flight response. There's also been a clinical study that showed that tapping reduces cortisol levels in the body. And the cortisol is the stress hormone. So when we're feeling stressed, we have an overproduction. So doing tapping helps lower that. And there's this great woman, Dr. Petta Stapleton, down in Bond University in Australia. And she wrote an incredible book called, I'm going to share her book, it's called The Science of Tapping. And slowly a lot of research is coming out. I feel like we are at the forefront. We have more understanding of why it works, but more research needs to happen. But what's incredible is I feel like it's kind of like the snowball effect, where it started slowly with the research, and now as more studies come out, there's more enthusiasm, and we're beginning to understand The same way that people love acupuncture, but it's only been very recent that Harvard's been able to do a study that shows that acupuncture does impact the brain. And so all these things are evolving. But my favorite part about this, Lindsay, is that it's so easy to have your own experience, and we can have an experience today together. And you can really feel the way your body is able to relax.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's the coolest part, is to see some of these, I'll even just call them like alternative methodologies, start to be researched and have that concrete evidence, because I've been a big believer in acupuncture and chiropractic and all of those modalities for years. But this is one I'm excited to add to my repertoire.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yes, I am down for actually creating an experience that people can follow along with. I wanted to have you, so I was on your website and I did there's a great intro video. That's such a great place for people to start. And you and your brother lead just a very short tapping exercise. And so here's a question that came up that I'm just curious to hear, really the reasoning behind. What is the power behind the physical touch combined with the words, making it distinct from like affirmations or positive self-talk, things of that nature? Because it is very
Yeah.
distinctly different.
They are very different in the sense too, especially with tapping, you are always starting with how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And so for those who really follow the law of attraction, there can be some hesitation at first because they say, well, I always hear it's important to think positive thoughts. And so by stating how I feel, am I ingraining it? Am I anchoring it in? Is there a bad side effect? This is the thing, is that we are having these thoughts anyway. So by giving them a voice, we're honoring what's already there. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't kind of feel uncomfortable when we say it, it means that it's not something that we need to clear. If someone said something to me offensive, but it's not really a trigger for me, I'd be like, well, they probably had a bad day. But if it's something that I worry about, like I wrote a book about weight loss and body confidence, and I just kind of would attract people in my life who would make comments like, you'd be so cute if you lost weight. Or, people are only going to listen to what you have to say unless you look a certain way. So all of those things hurt so deeply because they were a story that I'd been telling myself since I was 14 years old. Yeah. And so by beginning to say those things out loud, to say the fear, I was able to honor what was already there and to release it so it didn't have the same power, because I believed it was true. And when you believe something is true, it's a very physical experience as well, right? Mm-hmm. Like you feel it in your body. And so I had to look at some of my darkest, most limiting beliefs and give them a voice so that they didn't have power, because they were running in my subconscious mind and sometimes very clearly in my conscious mind.
Yeah, my goodness. I'm sure we can all think of those, like the negative tapes that play over and over and over. And sometimes they become so ingrained, we don't realize that they're running the show. They could be really deeply rooted from our childhood or years ago.
And what's hard is that we fight them. I mean, that's what I did. I read my first self-help book when I was 17, and all those things are incredibly helpful. I don't regret any book that I picked up. But I will say the biggest struggle that I had was this idea that I was broken and I needed to be fixed. And this idea that every time I was having a hard time, I was doing it wrong. Every time I suffered, not only would I be suffering, but I would be disappointed in myself for suffering. We have so many judgments, and especially women, especially many of us that are very empathetic and sensitive. And so I would look at my sensitivity and how I would feel things so deeply and just wish I was different and think that it was something that I needed to change or fix. When I learned this tool, it helped me embrace my feelings in a way where I can give them a voice so they're not creating that physical anxiety. And then, when that voice comes up, like I would say that in my journey around weight loss and body confidence, which was kind of the really big struggle for me, the first step was to look at my relationship with myself and with food and stop trying to diet, but just simply look at the emotions and the relationship. And why was I being pushed towards binge eating and overeating? Like what were the emotions behind that? And I really made such huge shifts with tapping. And then you find like this middle ground. So you do a lot of the inner work and you're doing great. So like 90% of the time you're great. And then there's like that 10% that triggers you. It's like the boy that you dated for a long time and you're like 90% over him, but then you come across like a picture that you were tagged in, and all of a sudden this weird feeling comes up and you're like, I know I don't really like him. I know that's not real, but why do I still have this feeling? And so you get annoyed at yourself for not being over him or not being completely over him.
Yes.
So in those moments, my biggest aha was I realized when I am scared and when I don't feel like enough, I would go to, it's because you're just not pretty enough. It's because you're not skinny enough. That's what the voice would say simply when I was scared. Because you have to look at your critical voice as this misguided self-love. I was somehow trying to tell myself this story thinking, well, if you could just lose weight, then the problem will be fixed. But it was such an old story and it wasn't the reality. It was an old pattern I picked up from my childhood, from culture. It wasn't mine. I wasn't born with that thought. And so the reason I share this is because I feel like a lot of your listeners are very advanced. Like they've done this inner work and maybe most of the time they feel great. But then they have this little time where they hear that voice that's like, you're not good enough. You're never going to make it. And when we hear that voice, the worst thing that we can do is suddenly feel like a failure, that somehow we haven't healed the wounds and we need to do more inner work and we're not good enough. When we hear that voice, the best thing that we can do is to have self-compassion.
Yeah.
And then that voice, like when I hear that voice, and I don't hear the weight loss voice anymore, to be honest, because I've done so much work on it. It took years. But when I was in that middle thing, every time I would go there, my thought would be like, okay, honey, you need to take care of yourself. You need to be gentle on yourself. Right now is a time to self-soothe. It's a time to tap. It's not a time to send an email or problem solve. It's a time to self-soothe. And that to me was a huge breakthrough. And tapping for me is my way to self-soothe.
I even just love that term for it, self-soothing. I was especially just looking into your website and doing a little bit more research before we chatted. What I was blown away by are all of the different topics or just truly like stressors that this can be applied to. So do you want to talk just about the range of all the different ways that people can use this? And we touched on a few of them, just the fears that come up around pursuit, taking that next action. You talked about like health and well-being and weight loss, but what are some of the other ways that you've seen just incredible results that people have gotten from using tapping specifically as a tool?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few things come to mind. What you have to understand is that, or what we have to remember is that stress impacts every aspect of our lives. And so sometimes I imagine someone coming to our website and being like, there's no way, like, how does one thing work on so many different things?
Yeah.
We're not specifically in the sense focusing on those things. We're focusing on the stress around those things. So for example, finances, tapping isn't going to bring you money. Like money is not going to fall on your lap and you're not going to get a big check in the mail. But what tapping will do is by addressing the anxiety and getting out of that fight or flight response, even before anything changes, you're going to feel more empowered to take that action. And so by self-soothing, by taking care of yourself, you're going to feel more empowered to find your way out. So the same thing with, weight loss. I realized I couldn't hate myself happy or criticize myself thin. I had to look at the stress that was leading me to these unhealthy habits. And so I focused on the stress. And then this is the other aspect that I love, which is not like a specific life topic, but just when you're having a very physical response to anxiety. Last week, I have a friend who works at Yale. She's a nurse there. Her husband's a pilot, and her husband got diagnosed with the coronavirus. And he's recovered, but he's had a few really bad days. She started to lose her sense of smell and her sense of taste, which is a symptom of the coronavirus. And she has 2 young girls. So they are in their house quarantined. And she's also getting all of the emails from her work, from Yale Hospital, about everything that's going on.
Mm.
So this is a nurse. This is someone who is used to some kind of pressure, but this new landscape is quite frankly overwhelming. And so she shared with me that she woke up in the middle of the night and her teeth were chattering. And she realized that she was having a panic attack. And she grabbed the app, she opened it, and right there is a tapping meditation for a panic attack, which is just about getting you back into your body and back into the moment. And so she just tapped and was able to breathe and feel calm. And she sent me a text message being like, I don't know what I would have done without that app. Like my body just I felt like I had no control over my body. Sometimes anxiety comes like that. I think it's one of the reasons that the VA has approved it and it works so well with PTSD is that sometimes things are so overwhelming that we can't logically comprehend, or we can't just talk our way out of it. We just find ourselves having very real physical experiences. And so using something that uses the body is so powerful.
Wow. Okay. So since you brought it up, talk a little bit about why you decided to launch the app and make things accessible in that platform. And then I would love to actually walk through an exercise together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
So before the app, we had written some books. I work with it's my two older brothers. It's Nick Ortner and also my other brother, Alex. My dad helps too. We're like really a family business, all of us.
I love it.
And the books were great. I mean, I think it's great to dive in and read stories, but the reality is that people aren't reading that many books anymore. People are completely overwhelmed. And the other aspect of it is it's like reading about meditating or meditating. Like having an experience makes the difference. It doesn't mean that reading about meditation isn't helpful, but the power is in the experience. And we just kept hearing people tell us, oh my goodness, I love tapping. I did it and I had a breakthrough, but I haven't used it for the last 6 months, or I haven't used it for the last year. And so we really were like, well, we have to find a way just to get people to have an experience, or people who might not pick up the book, but they're willing to take 10 minutes to try something new. And so we decided to create the app. It has over 170 tapping meditations and counting. We have a section we have a foundation called the Tapping Solution Foundation that started when the Sandy Hook shooting happened. We live in Newtown, Connecticut. And so it was a way for us to support our community. We began to train therapists and different clinicians in tapping for them to use it as a tool. So all of that evolved. And at the bottom of the app, we have free tapping meditations for veterans and for teachers.
Wow.
Just our way to say thank you. And those are free all the time. And we do have like 10 other free ones that are free all the time. And right now, and I feel like these are going to be up for a long time, we have a whole section around the anxiety that's going on with the coronavirus, because this virus is impacting our minds way before it impacts our bodies. And so it's simply about helping to calm our nervous system and to feel some peace when things feel so uncertain.
What a phenomenal resource. And we're going to link everything in the show notes so that people can find it really easily. And then if you're listening to this on audio, you may want to check out the video, because I'll have Jessica actually lead us through one of the processes. And I found it helpful when I watched the video to see where the actual points were. But for anyone who's even listening on audio, I would love if you would lead us through a practice and just show how easy and accessible it truly is and how fast. So I'll just kind of turn it over to you, and would love if you would do that.
I love that it's so easy. And other times I think it works against us, because we just live in a culture where we think things have to be hard in order for them to be worth it. And it's not. Things can be so easy. So I'm going to start by simply talking you through where the acupressure points are and how the process works. And then we'll dive into an experience.
Perfect.
So the very first point is the side of the hand. And it doesn't matter what side of the hand you use. It's called the karate chop point, or simply the side of the hand point. And it's underneath your pinky. So if you're watching the video, you can see me, but if you're listening, hopefully I'm describing it enough for you to follow along. And go ahead and tap with me here and just get familiar with the points. So the next point is the eyebrow point, and it's where the hair of your eyebrow begins, right on the bone, kind of the bridge of your nose, right on the bone. Yep, you got it. So I'm using 2 fingers here. People sometimes ask me how hard to tap. whatever feels right. It's not so hard that you're like hitting your head back or it hurts, and it's not so light that you barely feel it. So just medium pressure. Then follow your eyebrow until you find yourself on the side of the eye. So it's on the bone. So it's not like on the temple, but closer to the eye on the bone. That's the side of the eye point. Then underneath the eye, right on the bone as well. And you might notice as we tap here that one point is more sensitive than the other. That's really normal. Then we have underneath the nose, which is between the nose and the upper lip. Then we have underneath the mouth, which is the crease between the lip and the chin. And then the collarbone point. So you just feel your collarbone, you feel your, it's between the bones. You can also, if you feel the U-shaped bone under your throat and you go down an inch and over an inch on either side, you're going to hit it. If this is really kind of confusing you, the other thing that you can do is just grab your whole hand and just tap on your chest, and you're going to stimulate that point. So that's the collarbone point. And then the other point is underneath the arm. It's a hand width from your armpit. Since this is a women's podcast, this is where your bra strap lies. Easier to find.
Pretty safe to say that here.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have the top of the head. So those are the 9 points. And what's really great about this process is no matter what you focus on, you're always going to be tapping on those 9 points. What I will also say is if a week from now you don't remember any of the points, but you just remember the collarbone point, it's really powerful just to tap on your collarbone and breathe when you want to feel calm and centered. So these points can be used casually like that or very intentional with the full process. When it comes to tapping, the very first thing that we do, which we touched upon this earlier, is the setup statement, which is even though, and you say the feeling, I accept how I feel, or I accept myself and how I feel. You say that 3 times, and then you begin to tap on the points while giving a voice to how you feel. Again, you get to the point where you can think the thought, but your body feels calm, and suddenly you don't feel emotionally hijacked by that thought. When you're feeling more relaxed, maybe you do 1 or 2 rounds, maybe it's a lot of tapping, you can begin to move to something more positive. Again, stimulating these points is just sending a calming signal. So if you have a negative thought with a calming signal, all of a sudden you're like, well, that negative thought isn't that scary. But if you're having a positive thought and you're sending a calming signal, it's like you can sink into it even deeper. So you always want to do what feels right. And this is what I love personally about it, is that you start with where you are, because if you suddenly try to be positive, there's going to be a part of your mind that's like, yeah, right, Jess. Like, that's not really what you think. So you only want to move to the positive when you feel like there's a place for it to land. It's like we got to pull out the weeds before we can plant that seed. And so that's why it's intuitive in that sense when you're having an experience on your own. But together, what do you think we should focus on? We can do just kind of common anxiety and tension.
Maybe we focus it on what we started off talking about for the women who, because I think this is something we all have in common. Either we're taking that first action step toward our big idea, or maybe your vision is expanding. Maybe in this season, with everything happening in the world, you're finding a deeper level of purpose and have that fear of, am I really enough? To do this. I think that's really, that's something I've felt. I think it's pretty common.
I think what we can address specifically is that kind of frozen feeling, like that fear of taking that next step.
Yeah, I love that.
Right. So let's do this. For those who are listening, think about something that you've wanted to do that you just keep putting off. You think about it, you dream about it, but when it comes to taking action, you're either procrastinating, and maybe you know what, I'm scared. I'm procrastinating because I just have all of this uncertainty and all of this fear. As you're kind of thinking about this and reflecting on this, notice if you feel any anxiety in your body. You can even think about taking that action step. Maybe you think, oh, but what if someone says something bad, or what if I make a mistake? Notice how that shows up as anxiety in your body. And give it a number from 0 to 10, how that anxiety, that tension, and you might even kind of notice where it is. So just me having this conversation, I'm not thinking about a particular action step, but just talking about anxiety, I feel like we're recording this in the midst of the coronavirus, social distancing. So even me having this conversation, I'm like, oh, I'm feeling some tightness in my chest. So wherever you're feeling that tightness, just measure it. And let's take a nice deep breath in together, just to get ready for the process. So nice deep inhale in and exhale. If you need to close anything out, if you need to close a door, tell your partner you need a minute, do that, and let's have an experience together. So tapping, and Lindsay, if you can repeat after me. And for those who are listening, you can either repeat out loud as well, or you can repeat the words in your own mind. Okay, so on the side of the hand. Even though I really want to take a step forward.
Even though I really want to take a step forward.
But something is stopping me.
But something is stopping me.
I acknowledge how hard this has been.
I acknowledge how hard this has been.
And I give my body permission to relax.
And I give my body permission to relax.
Even though part of me feels ready.
Even though part of me feels ready.
And another part of me feels terrified.
And another part of me feels terrified.
I accept all these parts of me.
I accept all of these parts of me.
Even though part of me is ready to take this step.
Even though part of me is ready to take this step.
And another part of me feels stuck.
And another part of me feels stuck.
I accept all these parts of me.
I accept all these parts of me.
And I allow my body to relax.
And I allow my body to relax.
We're going to tap on the eyebrow point now, and we're just going to give a voice to this anxiety, this fear, and what's going on. So repeating after me, part of me feels ready.
Part of me feels ready.
Side of the eye, and part of me feels scared.
And part of me feels scared.
Under the eye, what if I make a mistake?
What if I make a mistake?
Under the nose, what if these things don't work out?
What if these things don't work out?
Under the mouth, all of this pressure.
All of this pressure.
Collarbone, this tension I'm holding on in my body.
This tension I'm holding on in my body.
Under the arm, and all of this stress.
And all of this stress.
I'm so used to this stress.
I'm so used to this stress.
And part of me believes.
And part of me believes.
Side of the eye, that if I don't feel stressed.
That if I don't feel stressed.
Under the eye, I won't push myself forward.
I won't push myself forward.
But I've been feeling a lot of stress.
But I've been feeling a lot of stress.
And now we're tapping under the mouth, and I still feel stuck.
And I still feel stuck.
Collarbone, honoring this conflict.
Honoring this conflict.
Under the arm, recognizing this stress.
Recognizing this stress.
Top of the head, and I'm open to begin to let it go.
And I'm open to begin to let it go.
Eyebrow, releasing this stress at my own pace.
Releasing this stress at my own pace.
Side of the eye, part of me is resistant.
Part of me is resistant.
Under the eye, because I'm so good at being hard on myself.
Because I'm so good at being hard on myself.
Under the nose, I'm so good at pushing myself forward.
I'm so good at pushing myself forward.
Under the mouth, but I recognize that I'm stuck.
But I recognize that I'm stuck.
Collarbone, I recognize this anxiety.
I recognize this anxiety.
Under the arm, and I'm willing to let it go.
And I'm willing to let it go.
Top of the head, allowing my body to relax.
Allowing my body to relax.
Eyebrow, it's safe to release this stress.
It's safe to release this stress.
Side of the eye, and I'm open to the idea.
And I'm open to the idea.
Under the eye, that I can take action.
That I can take action.
Under the nose, without this pressure.
Without this pressure.
Under the mouth, because no matter what happens.
Because no matter what happens.
Collarbone, whether it works out as planned or not.
Whether it works out as planned or not.
Under the arm, I'm going to be okay.
I'm going to be okay.
Top of the head, releasing this pressure.
Releasing this pressure.
And feeling free to take a step forward.
And feeling free to take a step forward.
Okay, now take a nice deep breath in. And exhale. And now just take a moment to breathe deeply and check in with your body. Notice if you feel any shift. Maybe for me, I realize that the tension in my chest has subsided. I feel like I can breathe a little deeper. That was just a few minutes of tapping. How was that for you, Lindsay? Did you feel any shift or any aha moments?
I feel like I am never aware of just how much tension I hold in my shoulders, where they're kind of hiked up by my ears, until I feel them relax. And I didn't realize that I was holding them in a less than relaxed position.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I noticed. It was like my shoulders just eased down and to probably where they're supposed to be.
Supposed to be, totally. And one of the things that I forgot to do here is in tapping, it's always helpful to measure on a scale from 0 to 10 how anxious you were. And that way you can measure. Wait, no, I did do that.
I think you did mention it. Yes, I think you did
mention it. Okay, I didn't forget. So check in with your number now. For those who are listening, notice maybe you went from an 8 to a 6 in just a few minutes, or an 8 to a 2. Notice that shift, because that's going to show you that two things happen. One, you might move in these 5 minutes and you go, okay, wait, there's something happening here. And it gives you that encouragement to keep going. The other thing that happens is I can't tell you how many times, Lindsay, I've tapped with someone who's been like so mad, and I forget to measure. And then they finish tapping and they go, I wasn't really that mad to begin with. And I'm like, you were red and steam was coming out of your ears. You were definitely a 10. So it's just nice to be aware of the shift. And the fun thing too is the measurement. It's called the subjective units of distress, the SUDS level, has always been a common part of tapping. And it's something that we incorporated in the app so that people could measure it before and after, and they can keep track of their own progress.
Wow.
What we didn't really realize when we created the app is the incredible data that we would get from that experience. We're able to see that, for example, the coronavirus anxiety tapping meditation that we've had 30,000 people use those tapping meditations with an average decrease of 45 to 50% of anxiety in 10 minutes. And so we're really beginning to kind of see these shifts that are happening. And most of the time it's between 40%, 50%. And this is just 10 minutes. So it's accessible, it's easy, and it is about ease, because this is my new thing as of today. I've been saying it to myself all day. Like, life doesn't have to be easy, but you can find the ease. Because right now I have so many people calling me. Like, I have a friend who is home in quarantine. She's a single mother with twins, and her mother's in the hospital. There is nothing that tapping can do to make that easy. That is a very difficult situation. But what you can do is create more ease. And if you can create more ease, you can take it one step at a time. You can take care of yourself through a really difficult process.
Yeah. Oh, what a beautiful way to really tie this together, because the truth is we can't control. I think that if this whole season is teaching us anything, it's how little control we have over external circumstances. But what a powerful tool and reminder of the control we can have a little bit over our body and our responses to things. And I feel like this is just such a great thing to have in the arsenal right now for those who need help to really get into their own bodies if things are taking over externally, because we've not been in this kind of a situation before. We're all facing unprecedented times.
The two things that create the most stress is the sense of is uncertainty and lack of control. Uncertainty and lack of control are the two things that creates anxiety.
Yeah.
And we are living in an incredibly uncertain time with something that we can't control. And so here we're having this response. I mean, I want to add one thing. I've had people reach out to me lately saying, I'm frustrated with myself because I have trouble not focusing on all the things that are going on in the world. And we need to have some ease and some self-compassion. It's the way that our brain is wired. If we are out in a field and we are looking at these beautiful, beautiful flowers, and all of a sudden at the corner, we see a bear, where are we going to focus? We're going to focus on the bear. We're not going to focus on the flowers. Mm-hmm. We are wired to look at danger to protect ourselves. And so when we find ourselves doing it, we need to say, okay, well, I'm looking at this danger, so I'm going to stay home. I'm going to take actions to protect myself. But then what happens when you're taking those actions and you're still feeling that fear, like that bear is still there? it's because our brain is wired and we actually have to do something. It doesn't come naturally. You can't get mad at yourself for focusing on the negative because that's what you're supposed to do to keep yourself alive. What you have to do is have self-compassion and know, okay, well, when I have this thought, this is where I go. This is how I self-soothe.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I could honestly talk to you all day. We might have to bring you back again and again and again.
I would
But
love to.
for now, we already mentioned the app. Where are the other best places for people to connect with you and just learn more about you and your work?
Yeah. So connect with me on Instagram at Jessica Ortner. You'll also get to see my really cute 1-year-old if you do that. You can also find me on Facebook. And then at thetappingsolution.com, we have a lot of great resources there as well. And yeah, that's it. And then we have an incredible book. So if this is something that really interests you and you want to sit down, just look up The Tapping Solution on Amazon and you're going to see that between my brother and I, we've written a few books using tapping on specific challenges.
Oh my goodness. Well, I cannot wait to fill up my Amazon cart and the app. I'm going to download the app as soon as we finish.
Thank you.
I want to wrap with one question. And, it's been interesting as we navigate this season, we've kept this question the same. And I think it's a good reminder for each of us to tap back into, no pun intended, just really the power that we do have. And so we love to know what has been a moment in the recent, it could be a week or two, right? Where you have felt like a total powerhouse. Could be something big, could be something super small, but just something that you had a moment where you paused and you're like, wow, okay, I really do make a difference in the world, or I really rocked motherhood today. Anything at all. But what is something for you that has been a powerhouse moment in this past week?
Honestly, it's so funny. I'm like getting teary-eyed just thinking about this. It's now, and let me tell you why. So we're living in a very challenging time, and I'm a mom, and all of a sudden I don't have childcare, like many parents out there. And I'm very blessed to be able to still work. And also it comes with a lot of challenges. And especially now with people feeling such levels of anxiety, there's more demand for this work than ever before. And so I have been trying to balance giving, helping others, being a mom, and taking care of myself. And that's the key, taking care of myself. Mm-hmm. And so like, as you know, it's later for me. I'm on the East Coast. I put my baby to sleep and I jumped on this podcast and I was like really tired. It's been like a long day. But then the moment I start talking about what I'm passionate about, it's like I get the energy that I need. So, I'm definitely being aware of making sure that I'm taking moments. Like I've decided tomorrow morning, I'm going to give the baby to my husband and just try to take a break where I'm not working and I'm not doing anything. But it's really this moment in realizing that when we are tested to do more and to give more, that we can rise to the occasion and we find a strength that we wouldn't have discovered that we had if things weren't challenging.
Oh, that was so well said. And I'm super grateful for you staying up past what would be my bedtime.
Yeah.
But truly, thank you so much for spending some time with us, for sharing your gifts with our community. I'm so, so grateful.
Thank you. Thank you.